In my art journey, there's been certain lessons that have stuck with me and that have been little treasures to keep in mind when I'm painting. And one of those was a teacher once said to me that your painting is only as good as its weakest spot or area. So when I'm looking at a painting, I look at the patterns within, a couple of square inches and look over my whole painting to see if every part of it is interesting to the eye. And this can make for really fun painting, particularly when you're working in colour. And pushing those boundaries and putting one colour against the other colour to make patterns. It's also something to consider when you're applying your paint or your pastel or whatever you're using to add variations in your strokes, in the way you apply your medium, whether that's angles or differentiation in mass, small amounts to large amounts, thick or thin paint, gentle or vigorous strokes. So today I'm going to be working on this painting, which is a plein air piece that I did a little while ago. And I've just come back from a plein air trip for about a week painting consistently outside. And it's autumn time, so it's the similar colours. So with that in my mind fresh, I'm going to give this painting a bit more life. And I'm going to be working all over to create that energy in every part of the painting. Now, it's not that I'm not happy with the painting, I'm just finding it a little dull. So because I've done it a while ago and I haven't touched it since, and I've just come back from consistently painting in vivid colour outside in beautiful autumn, like in the middle of autumn in an area of Victoria that is very colourful, I'm going to take advantage of that just to improve this painting. And if you stick with me to the end, you'll see the difference. So the first thing that I noticed as soon as I picked it up, that it needed some blue in it. All that middle ground was quite dull, and all the darks in this were still showing charcoal, so it had that dull black in it, which I don't like in my pastels. So I wanted to replace the darks with cleaner colour, still greyed off colours, but that had some warmth and depths in it, a bit more than black. So what I'll do is I'll pick up one colour and work one colour everywhere I can see it. I move all around the painting very quickly because I'm kind of trying to look at it as a whole to see where else that colour would sit. Now, sometimes the pastel doesn't land well. Sometimes you put it down and you go, that doesn't kind of work. But I don't worry too much about it because on the next pass or the one after or the one after that, I will likely see that and change it. So I don't worry too much about it. But most strokes are very intentional, and I place them where I can see that colour benefiting the painting. Now, some people are going to ask or think to themselves, what colour do I use? Where do I even start? And the way I start is I look at a general colour. So say I'm looking at an area of green. I decide, is it a warmer green or a cooler green? And I go thereabouts. So I reach for a colour that it appeals to me. I place a little bit down. If it looks right, then I go with that. So it's pretty much as simple as that, but I have had a lot of practice painting, obviously, and with colour. So it all comes with practice, and I would encourage you, if you're watching this and you're new to pastel or new to painting or not confident in colour, to do lots of little exercises and not be scared of experimenting and testing out what colour does. And start with a very limited amount of colour, limited palette. You can even limit pastels, even though you tend to need more colours in pastels than you do with paint. You can get away with like 3 or 4 colours with paint, and you need much more in pastel, you can still limit your pastels. And although my pastels are quite colourful, I still try and limit them, believe it or not. So you'll see at the end of the video how many colours I used. Admittedly, this painting has already been painted to a degree, so there would have been other colours in there, but I still tried to limit the colours I was using. Now what you're seeing me do here is I was adding the light, that warm glow, and I do remember seeing that at the time. And this is painted actually in quite a suburban built up area. It looks like it's in the middle of the bush, but what had happened is I was off to paint with a group of painters at the Botanic Gardens, and it was so popular that day I couldn't get a car park. So I had to about face and head home. And on the way home, I thought, I'm just going to paint. I'm just anywhere. So I pulled off into a shopping centre car park in Mumbok, and there's a little tiny park opposite the shopping centre. So it's right on a busy road. There's a roundabout there and people walking past. And right behind that skyline there is other buildings, which I left out. So I set up there and captured a few people as they walked through, but there was a lovely light coming through. It was morning time and or mid-morning, I think, by the time I was in the middle of it, and I had that lovely glow coming through and hitting the grass in that mid-ground. Now I do love the yellows and the greens. The green can be a very scary colour to use, but I do love them in my pastels, and I do tend to go for those glowy yellow colours where possible. And like I said, I've just come back from a painting trip in autumn, and it's all about those warm golden colours contrasting against the cools. To correct myself, I wasn't heading to the botanical gardens, I was heading to the rhododendron gardens. So in case somebody is from that area and says, no, there's no botanical gardens there. There's lots of beautiful gardens up in the Dandenong Ranges, and that's where Mumbok is. And you're looking at a scene that's very typical of our Australian bush landscape, even on the sides of the roads, the trees and shrubbery that you would see. But in saying that, I have actually seen other artists paint landscapes, and I could place myself in there. In Australia, it really does look like parts of Australia. So that's what I've noticed observing other artists' landscape work, that some countries have very similar landscapes in parts of them, and we can relate to it as home. What you'll see as I'm doing this adjustments is this tree is going to change quite a lot. Now I'm putting a branch in front of it, in front of those two branches, and I'm pulling in again the painting sessions that I've been doing this week. So I've been painting quite a few trees, and I will be, just out of my head, I'm not even referring to any reference that I took or that, but just from painting some, I'm going to be pulling in some of the movement of the bark and the form of the tree. This is a younger tree than the trees I've been painting, but it has similar characteristics. So I'm pulling that in fresh just after painting a couple of gum tree paintings. So it is really a good idea if you're out landscape painting and you're seeing things in the natural and observing and taking note of it, it kind of concretes in your head as you're painting. But if you then come back to the studio and do something else that has those elements in, it reinforces it again, because you're repeating that lesson. So it helps you with future work, just to add some little things here and there, take liberties, because there are some times where something's looking a bit flat or boring and you need some more description in there, and you're able to pull from that previous knowledge and add it to your existing work. The other thing that I'm doing that you can't see in the background, but I'm pulling my colours out of colours I have been using. So when I paint outdoors, I have a plein air kit of pastels, which quite a lot of pastels in, and then I have a container, and as I'm working I put the colours that I'm working with in that container and keep it in the container for the whole of either painting that day, or in a painting trip I tend to hang on to it for a day or two, unless the painting's not, going the way I want, and then I will change the colours up. So I don't stick to the same colours all the time, but for that painting session I may use those colours and use them in another painting, which is what I'm doing here. So you'll see as that blue went on, it still has that sapling in shade, but it's a more vibrant colour to use. So I'm adding some more blue in here. It's pretty tricky to be adding blue background, foreground and that. There is a bit of a push and pull because, different colours recede and or jump forward. So it is tricky to do this, but you just keep working until it sits right with you. Also, what I'm keeping in mind is this is a study that I have the idea of doing a large painting from. So I do want to do some larger works from my pastel studies, particularly my plein air work, which most of my pastels are. And so I'm keeping that in mind when I'm working areas. So you can stop a lot earlier or have a lot broader strokes in smaller paintings like this. This is about a 9 by 12 inch painting. But I know that I'm going to want to blow this up, and I want as much information in the areas as possible, and I want those patterns worked out on small scale because it takes 10 times longer to do it once you blow it up. So it's better to have all of that resolved in a study and then move into a larger piece, and you can do it, with more confidence. So if you'd like to see some videos of the plein air trips and some of the paintings that I've done, I do have a lot of footage that I'm going to turn into videos for you, and I've got footage of the Bright trip, which is the one I've just been on, and I do have videos up already, so I'll link one in the description below so you can go and watch that. And I would highly encourage you, if you're a painter, if you have not been plein air painting, it does have its challenges, but it is a whole discipline in itself, and it helps develop your artwork more rapidly and more expressively, and it just gives you a lot of intel for your paintings. Because photos can lie a lot, can change values. The darks look a lot darker than what they are in real life, and the lights can look a lot lighter than what they are in real life. So sometimes when you're working from a photo, you can actually tell that it's been done from a photo because of the way the camera portrays what's out there. It's also inclined to distort a lot of things, so there is that distortion too. But the whole experience of getting out there is just something else. You meet people, you have encounters with different things, sometimes good encounters, or just like the trip I've just been on, a snake encounter, but that's the first one I've ever had. But some days I feel like I'm Snow White with the birds landing right near me and keeping me company, and just the things you see in the nature that you don't notice when you're walking past or driving past or you're inside. It's just a totally beautiful experience. And you can have the windy days that are frustrating, or it can be rained out, but in general, most times it is well worth the experience. And wonderfully, there's a lot of people doing plein air now. I know a lot of females in particular that do plein air painting. When we go out on plein air trips with art groups, it's predominantly female, but yeah, there's a lot of people that do landscape painting outside now, so it's become quite popular, which is fantastic. And I've even seen and experienced myself paintings winning awards, which is very encouraging, because outdoors you're very limited in time, your light moves, you're working against a clock and against those elements, so it's much more difficult to get certain, a lot of detail, or have that time to really play or work over your paintings. So to have plein air paintings up against studio work and still pick off prizes and have that acknowledgement and encouragement is really fantastic. Now, just a few seconds ago, you would have seen me with a dark pastel. Now, that is a very deep purple colour that I was adding in the darks, and I'm very careful not to put that all over or do too much of that. This is my, when you finish a painting and you just put that little sparkle of light on it and it finishes, or say you're painting an eye of an animal and you just put those little highlights on it, kind of gives it that nice jump, that nice finish. Well, darks can be lost as you're painting, and it's important to reinstate them, but not all over the place. It's nice to pick just the darkest dark area where you know them to be, or in this case, I'm just pulling in my memory and what I know of light and the way it falls and popping them in. Somebody will probably ask, am I using any photo references? Do I have them on the side there? Am I looking at anything? I'm not looking at anything, and I didn't even look at the photos from this time. I'm purely allowing this painting to be what it was and just making the little sections more colourful, more movement in it, more pattern, and then kind of sitting back and looking at the darks and lights to make sure that they are sitting where I want them to sit, and it's really starting to come together now. Another thing to keep in mind when you're painting your painting is what is your focal point. And in this case, that figure area is my focal point. So you will probably notice that more information and more interest in the foreground tree, because that's going to be right in blocking your view to that figure and needs to have attention, but I have deliberately kept the interesting bark area and the detail around near where that figure is, so it holds the eye in that area. If I was to do a lot of detail right down the bottom and get carried away with the bark down there, it will draw your eye down to the bottom of the painting, which I don't want the eye being fighting back and forth between that figure and the bottom of the tree. That tree's dominating enough, and particularly, with it being larger, the largest object apart from the light on that middle ground, so that's probably the second largest object in the painting. So that was a challenge in itself to make sure that sat but didn't kind of become the topic, the subject. So when I'm looking at this painting, you go to that figure. And I've deliberately put the red in the figure to draw the eye to it. Although I think at the time the person that went past did have red, because I tend to notice that people walk past, and if they've got a red top on or a red cap on, I've got a friend that paints with me fairly regularly, and she always wears a red hat, so she often ends up in the painting because that pop of red's nice to have on the figures, and I like it in my work. So so I put that red there, and it's very isolated red. There's not a lot of that red in the painting, but I did make sure it was in the painting. But it's very, very subtle. So if you were to look up close to the painting, you would see it in a few little spots, but there's not a lot. So I recommend you never isolate a colour completely. Make sure it's in the painting in different places as well. It doesn't need to be dominating, but it kind of got to be tied into the work. Well, that's how I work anyhow. So we're getting very close to the finish now. So you'll see that I added some dotty stuff in there. I'm very wary of adding too much small detail into the end, so you can tell I'm getting closer to the end. You never go overboard with those dots. So if you get a bit too many, you put in some solid colour and or remove them. But I'm bringing a bit of that autumn sparkle that I've been observing over the week into this one. So it'll take that golden colour up into the foliage and have the light hit on little bits of foliage. So without describing every little leaf, I'm going to describe a few and have some dark leaves and some light leaves and finish this off. So sit back and we'll have a look, and I will show you close up so you can see all the pattern work in it. And if you would like to support my channel, I would just absolutely love it if you could like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't already. It will help me get my work out to others, and it will help encourage others and teach others little things that I can share, and hopefully you also. And if you are part of an art society looking for demonstrators, I do local demonstrations and via Zoom internationally. Feel free to get in contact with me via the website. I would love to share some tips and tricks with your members. And I'm also available to judge shows within a certain distance. I can do that also. So in half an hour, we've transformed the painting together. So I hope you enjoyed all of that. We'll have a look now at the details so that you can see up close all that pattern work and the difference each section is to each other, which is really important. Well, I think it's important. So here's some, I will scan around the painting with the video, and then I've got some just snapshots, but you can see all of the strokes now up close and all the colours playing against each other, which I just absolutely love.